Almost everyone thinks the book of Revelation is about the end of the world. It isn't. Not the way you've been told. It is a letter written to 7 real churches in 7 real cities, full of real people who were terrified and dying. And the first word of the whole book is not doom. It is not judgment. It is not fire. The first word is unveiling. Picture an old man on a rock in the middle of the sea. The rock is called Patmos. It is a barren scrap of land in the Aegean, the kind of place an empire sends people when it wants them to disappear slowly, of old age and weather and forgetting. He is alone. Every friend he started with is dead. He is the last one left. He is so old that he can remember the sound of a particular voice from 60 years before, a voice he heard on a hillside in Galilee, a voice he watched die on a Roman cross, and then watched walk out of a tomb. And now, on this island where he was sent to be forgotten, he hears something behind him, a voice like a trumpet. We will come back to what that voice says. Hold on to it, because what it says changes how you read every page that follows. This is not a video about the Antichrist. This is not a video about a microchip in your hand, or a number on your forehead, or a timeline of the last 7 years. This is a video about what John actually saw, why he wrote it down, and why a book that has scared people for 2,000 years was originally meant to do the exact opposite. By the end of these 30 minutes, the most frightening book in the Bible is going to look completely different. I promise you that. So let's start where the book starts, not with the end of the world, with a word. The book opens like this: the revelation of Jesus Christ. That word, revelation, is the Greek word apokalypsis. And here's the thing nobody tells you. Apokalypsis does not mean catastrophe. It does not mean the end. It means an unveiling. It is the word you would use for pulling a sheet off a statue, lifting a veil off a bride's face, pulling back a curtain so the audience can finally see what was on the stage the whole time. So the title of the scariest book in the Bible is not the disaster. It is the unveiling. And what gets unveiled is not a monster. It is a throne. And on that throne is the same person who walked out of that tomb. Once you know that, the whole book turns inside out. Now, who was John? And why was he on a rock in the sea? By the time he wrote this, John was an old man, probably in his 90s, the last surviving member of the 12 who had followed Jesus. The historian Eusebius, writing about 200 years later, records that John had been exiled to Patmos under the Emperor Domitian and later released. Exile was not a vacation. It was a punishment for people the empire found inconvenient, but did not want to make into public martyrs. So they sent them to a rock to rot. And why was he inconvenient? Because of one sentence the empire could not tolerate. Christians said Jesus is Lord, and Rome had a different man it called Lord. You have to feel the world this letter dropped into. The Emperor Domitian had begun demanding that people address him as Dominus et Deus, meaning Lord and God. Across the empire, you were expected to burn a pinch of incense before the emperor's image and say 4 words: Caesar is Lord. It took 10 seconds. It cost nothing, and it would save your life. The Christians would not do it, not because they were stubborn, because they believed those 4 words belonged to someone else. So they paid for it. Listen to how a Roman historian, not a Christian, but a Roman, named Tacitus, describes what the Emperor Nero had already done to them a generation earlier. He records that Christians were covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs, that they were nailed to crosses, that some were set on fire and burned alive in the evening to light up Nero's gardens like human torches. Tacitus was not trying to make them look noble. He thought they were a strange and harmful cult. He just wrote down what happened. That is the world John was writing to. Not a comfortable suburban church wondering about prophecy charts. A church being hunted, and it is worth slowing down to feel exactly what that pinch of incense meant, because it is easy to hear it and think, well, why not just do it? It is only incense? Here is why. In the Roman world, religion and citizenship and loyalty to the state were all the same thing. To refuse to honor the emperor's image was not just a private spiritual choice. It looked like treason. It looked like you were a danger to the whole community, like you might bring the wrath of the gods down on your city. So a Christian who would not burn that incense was not seen as a quiet believer minding their own business. They were seen as a public enemy. Neighbors turned them in. Business partners stopped doing business with them. Families split down the middle. You could lose your shop, your standing, your safety, and then your life. All over 10 seconds of incense you refuse to burn. That is the pressure these 7 churches were living under every single day. And into that pressure, John sends a letter. And there is a word for those who died. The Greek word is Martys. You know it as martyr. But it did not originally mean someone who dies. It meant a witness, someone who testifies in court to what they have seen. And to these believers, testifying and dying had become the same act. To witness was to die. To die was to witness. Hold on to that word, because the whole book is built on it. Revelation even names one of them. In the 2nd chapter, almost in passing, Jesus mentions a man in the city of Pergamum. He calls him Antipas, my faithful witness, who was killed among you. One name, one man. We know almost nothing else about him, but the risen Christ knew his name and put it in the book so that 2,000 years later, you would say it out loud. Antipas. He refused to say Caesar is Lord, and it cost him everything. So when you imagine the first people who heard this letter read aloud, do not imagine theologians arguing about timelines. Imagine a small room, a door that could be kicked in at any moment, people who have already buried friends. And someone stands up and unrolls a scroll from the old man on the island. And the first thing it does is not predict the future. The first thing it does is comfort them. Quick word before we go further. If this kind of study, going back to the original language, back to the real history under the text, is something that helps you, the best thing you can do is subscribe and stay with us. That is genuinely what makes this channel possible. And to everyone who already supports it, thank you. You are part of every one of these. Now, back to the rock and the 7 churches. Because the first thing Revelation does before any beast or trumpet or bowl is write 7 letters. 7 short, specific letters to 7 real congregations on a real Roman mail route through what is now Western Turkey. Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. And here is what is remarkable about them. They are not generic. The risen Christ speaks to each church about its own situation by name. To the church in Smyrna, which was poor and persecuted, he says, I know your suffering and your poverty, but you are rich. He does not promise them rescue. He tells them some of them are about to be thrown in prison, and he says, be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Smyrna was a city famous for a crown of buildings along its hilltop. He takes the thing their city was proud of, and he says, the real crown is the one I give to the ones who do not break. To the church in Pergamum, the city where Antipas was killed, he says, I know where you live, where Satan's throne is. Pergamum had a massive altar to Zeus carved into the hillside and was a center of the emperor worship cult. He is not being poetic. He is saying, I know you are living in the shadow of the very thing that is trying to kill you. I see your exact address. To the church in Sardis, a city that had twice been conquered because its watchmen fell asleep and the walls were left unguarded, he says, wake up, be watchful. He uses their own history against their complacency. And to the church in Laodicea, a wealthy banking town that had grown comfortable and self-satisfied, he says, you say you are rich and need nothing, and you do not know that you are poor and blind and naked. Laodicea was so rich that when an earthquake leveled it, The city refused Rome's offer to help rebuild and paid for everything itself. It was famous for three things: its banks, its black wool, and a medical school that produced eye ointment. And to that exact city, the risen Christ says, "Buy from me gold refined in fire, and white garments, and ointment for your eyes so you can see." He takes their banks, their wool, and their eye medicine, and he tells them they are spiritually bankrupt, naked, and blind. This is not a stranger predicting the future. This is someone who knows your street, your job, your specific temptation, your specific fear. Before Revelation shows you anything cosmic, it shows you that the one on the throne knows your name and your address. Now, before we get to the throne room, you have to understand the shape of the rest of the book, or the symbols will swallow you. After the 7 letters, John keeps seeing things in sevens. 7 seals on a scroll, open one by one. 7 trumpets, sounded one after another. 7 bowls poured out, and each set unleashes some new wave of judgment and upheaval on the earth. This is the part that scares people. The horsemen, the earthquakes, the darkened sun. But here's the part nobody tells you about all of it. John was not inventing a brand new style of writing. This kind of writing already had a name and a long history. It is called apocalyptic literature, and Jewish writers had been using it for centuries before John. It is a genre built almost entirely out of symbol. Beasts that stand for empires, numbers that carry meaning, cosmic signs that point to earthly events. The original readers knew they were reading symbols. A beast meant a kingdom. A horn meant a king. 7s meant completeness. They did not read it as a literal weather report of the future, the way we sometimes do. They read it the way you read a political cartoon, where an eagle means a nation and a snake means a threat, and everybody in the room understands the code without anyone explaining it. So when the sun goes dark and the stars fall, John is not necessarily describing astronomy. He is using the oldest visual language his people had to say one enormous thing. Every power that sets itself against God is going to come down. Every empire that demanded worship is going to fall. The whole frightening middle of the book is, underneath the symbols, a single promise to a hunted church. The thing crushing you will not last. It only thinks it is forever. And then, in the 5th chapter, comes the moment the entire book turns on. This is the hinge. Miss this, and you misread everything. John is shown a throne room in heaven, and it is overwhelming. There is a throne, and around it flashes of lightning and peals of thunder, and a sea of glass like crystal, and living creatures and elders falling down in worship without stopping. And in the middle of all that glory, there is a sealed scroll, a scroll held in the right hand of the one on the throne, a scroll that holds the future of all things, sealed with 7 seals. And a mighty angel calls out with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one answers. No one in heaven, no one on earth, no one anywhere is found worthy to open it or even to look inside it. John says he wept. He wept loudly. Sit with that for a second. The last apostle, standing in the actual throne room of heaven, surrounded by glory, and he breaks down crying. Why? Because it seemed like the story had no one to finish it. It seemed like the scroll of history would stay sealed forever, like there was no one good enough to take the future in hand and bring it home. And then one of the elders says to him, "Do not weep. Look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll. A lion, the strongest animal in the ancient imagination, the symbol of the conquering king of Judah, going all the way back to a blessing spoken over the tribe 1,000 years before. John has just been told the lion has won the war. He turns to look at the lion, and here's what he actually sees. He does not see a lion. He sees a lamb, and not a powerful golden victorious lamb. The Greek word is arnion, a little lamb, a tender word, a diminutive, the word you would use for a small and vulnerable one. And it is standing as though it had been slain, a wounded little lamb with the marks of its own death still visibly on its body, standing in the center of the throne. Read that again. He is told to look at the lion who conquered. And when he looks, he sees a slaughtered lamb. Because in this book, the way you win is not the way the empire wins. Rome conquered by killing. The lamb conquered by dying. The throne of the universe is not held by the one who shed the most blood. It is held by the one who let his own be shed. You feel the thread starting to form now? It has been there since the first word. Apokalypsis, unveiling. What gets unveiled behind all the symbols and beasts and trumpets is that the slain lamb is already on the throne. The empire only thinks it is in charge. Now, the beast and the number, because you cannot explain Revelation without it, and almost everyone gets it wrong. In the 13th chapter, John sees a beast rising out of the sea with the authority to make war on the saints, demanding worship, killing those who will not give it. And he ends with a riddle. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. It is the number of a man, and his number is 666. For 2,000 years, people have tried to pin that number on someone. A pope, a president, a dictator, a barcode. But here is the part most people are never told. In the ancient world, letters were also numbers. Every letter had a numeric value, and you could add up a name to get a total. It was a known game. They did it on the walls of Pompeii. And when you take the name of the Emperor Nero, written as Caesar Nero, and you write it in Hebrew letters and add it up, it comes to 666. The beast was not a far future mystery to John's readers. The beast had a throne in Rome and a name they were forbidden to insult out loud. So John wrote it in code, a number only the persecuted church would recognize. He was not predicting a monster 10,000 years away. He was telling a hunted people, I know exactly who is hunting you. He has a name, and he is not the one on the throne that matters. So now go back to the rock, go back to the old man, and the voice like a trumpet behind him that I told you to hold on to. When John turns to see the voice, he sees the risen Christ. Eyes like fire, a voice like rushing water, so overwhelming that John, the last apostle, the one who had leaned on Jesus' chest at the Last Supper, falls down at his feet like a dead man. And here is what the voice says. Here is the open the whole book was waiting on. The first words out of the mouth of the one on the throne to the frightened old man on the prison rock are these. Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forever. Do not be afraid. That is the first thing the scariest book in the Bible says. Not brace yourself. Not here comes the horror. Do not be afraid. The same three words angels said to shepherds. The same words said to Mary. The first thing God almost always says when heaven touches earth. Do not be afraid. Think about how you read a frightening book. If a story scares you, what do you sometimes do? You flip to the last page. You read the ending first. Because if you know how it ends, you can bear the terrifying middle. You can walk through the dark chapters because you have already seen the light on the final page. That is what Revelation is for. It is the last page, handed to a church living in the terrifying middle. John was not given this vision to frighten the persecuted. He was given it so they could read the end before they had to live the rest. And the end is not a mushroom cloud. The end is this. In the final chapters, a new heaven and a new earth, and a voice from the throne that says God himself will wipe every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. That is the destination. That is what the whole violent, strange, symbolic book is driving toward. Not destruction. A wedding. Not the end of everything, the healing of everything. Now picture that first room one more time. The small room with the door that could be kicked in. The people who have already buried friends, who have already lost shops and standing, who are not sure they will see next year. Someone unrolls the scroll from the old man on the island and reads it aloud by lamplight. And imagine what happens inside their chest when they hear it. They are not hearing a horror story about a far-off future. They are hearing a description of the very thing they are living through, written by someone who is living it too, on a prison rock, who looked behind the veil and saw who is actually on the throne. They hear that the beast has a name and a number and a deadline. They hear that the one who was slain is alive forever. They hear 3 times over, do not be afraid. And the people in that room who could lose everything by morning do something that should be impossible. They are comforted. The most dangerous book in the empire turns out to be, for them, the most comforting words they have ever heard. That is what Revelation did the first time it was ever read out loud. And now, bring them all into the room one more time. Because every figure in this book got something other than what they expected. John did not get rescued from his island. He got a vision of the throne. The church at Smyrna did not get spared from suffering. It got the crown of life. Antipas did not get to keep his life. He got his name written into eternity by the one on the throne. The 7 churches did not get an easier road. They got a letter that knew their name. And the slain lamb did not get the throne the way the empire takes thrones, by killing. He got it the only way it could truly be won, by dying and rising and being alive forever. That is the thread. That is the whole book in one sentence. Revelation was never written to scare the church about the future. It was written to tell a dying church that the one who already won is still on the throne and always will be. So let me leave you with 3 things to carry out of this. First, the factual one. Revelation is not a coded countdown to the end of the world. It is Apokalypsis, an unveiling, a letter to 7 real, frightened, dying churches, pulling back the curtain to show them who is actually in charge. Read it as a letter of comfort, because that is what it is. Second, the personal one. The same Christ who knew the exact street and struggle of each of those 7 churches knows yours. He told a poor church it was rich, and a comfortable church it was poor, and a blind city it could not see. He is not a stranger to your specific fear. He knows your address. And third, the one that goes deeper than the rest. The first thing the risen, reigning, all-powerful King of the universe said to a terrified old man on the worst day of an exile meant to erase him was 3 words. Do not be afraid. If that is the first thing he says from the throne, then whatever you are walking through, however dark the middle of your story feels right now, you are allowed to read the last page. And the last page says he wipes away the tears. So here's the question I cannot answer for you. If you really believed that the slain lamb is already on the throne, that the worst the empire could do has already lost, what would you stop being afraid of starting tomorrow morning? Sit with that one and tell me below, which part of Revelation has scared you the most over the years? Even one word. I read them. Subscribe if this changed how you see the last book of the Bible. Share this with someone who has always been afraid of Revelation, or who has never made it past the beast and the numbers to the throne. And may the one who calls himself the first and the last, who died and is alive forever, meet you in the middle of your own story and say to you the same 3 words he said to the old man on the rock. God bless you.